Yo, what's good, guys? I'm back with another video on how you can iterate on your template. I was pretty much covering how to get started, with your first little beat here, your kick, your snare, your wavetable, or your MIDI channel, whatever it is that you choose to put. You can do vital, you can do wavetable, and iterate on it. So let's say I want to have this with a few notes here. I'll just do a bunch of random notes again. Okay, so let's just say that's what I want to have every time I open up Ableton. And let me throw a hat in here. So I'm going to do Control T. And let's see, I'll make this somewhat the same. It's the wrong color. Okay, there we go. And going back to my sample pack, I have splice samples here. So pick whatever hat. But once you get to the point where you start developing your favorite samples, you can put them all in your own pack and just label them accordingly. Or what I would suggest is, every time you just want a certain instrument, you do Control F, and that will search your entire sample library for whatever you're looking for. So if I want to look for a hi-hat, I'll just do hi-hat, and it'll just give me whatever I have in all of my results, and it'll have this long list that you can pick from. But since you're starting out, you probably have like 4 or 5, depending on however many samples you download the first time, and you just pick whatever you think will be best. Try not to put too much thought and effort into it right away as you're starting out, but as you develop your sound over time, you'll figure out what your favorites are, and then just put those all in a folder so you don't have to always Control F, and you can just look in your pack, and then you click on your pack, and then you just hit hi-hat, and it'll show up. It'll be like 1 of 2 or 1 of 3, and then you could pick from there. And let's just say I want this one, so I'll put this over here into the, I don't even know, what do you call this thing? Ableton has this little helpful info view here. It has this arrow in the bottom left corner, at least on Ableton 10, and it tells you what different things are when you hover on them. So if you hover over this, it'll tell you track name, and it'll tell you, like the little description of what it is as you hover over it, or you click on it. It'll tell you, oh, this is an audio clip, or oh, this is a MIDI clip. These are what the notes are, the clip notes, and this is the note editor, and it tells you little hints as you're learning Ableton, which I highly recommend you have open, even though it takes up some of your view over here when you're starting out. But it'll tell you what things are, and you can learn them, So this is the device, device title bar, this is the visualization, actual device, your parameters, which are the different things you can change that will change the sound. And over here, what is this called? The session. This is the session view, which is not really used that much amongst most people that make production content. In my honest opinion, there's probably like a handful of them that do, but you can make music like this too. I personally don't. I've never was drawn to it, but if you want to record a live set, you can use Ableton to record live sets, or you can actually play your instruments in a live setting using Ableton, which a few producer DJs do. But I won't really cover that when I'm showing you how to use Ableton. I will use the arrangement view. So anyways, the arrangement view is what I was referring to. And now that I can get back to adding my hats, I'll just add my hats wherever I see fit. As you can see here, that has this grid spacing here. 1 out of 32 means that each one of these little bars is 1/32 of a note, or 1/32 of a note. So if I put all of my hi-hats in here one by one, it's going to sound very fast. And I'll drag the fader forward because otherwise you're going to hear that the sound leaks into the next sound. And I'll just show you what that sounds like. It's not going to sound very good, but you'll hear what it is. And I'm going to turn the volume down because it might be really loud. Which is really cool when you're trying to make things sound busy or really cool, in other words. You can have some sounds doing this sort of repetition really quickly. But as you can press Control 1 and 2, you'll notice this grid spacing changes. If you press Control 1, it zooms in a lot more. And if you press Control 2, it will zoom out or make these grids smaller. So Control 2 will, make them now. This is one of those. Here, let me just delete some of these. So this is my hi-hat. You can see that when I have it on 132, this takes up one full bar. But if I press Control 2 and I zoom out, now it's 116. So if I drag this for the full length of this measure, now it is taking the full width of that. And as I continue to press Control 2, it will make it bigger and bigger. So now it's 1/8, and now it's 1/4, and now it's 1/2. So each time it gets multiplied or divided by 2. So it will make it significantly bigger or smaller, and you can mess around with that as you're producing, as you find what you want to do with your arrangement. But I'll just show you a really quick example. So again, I'm pressing Control D, and now I'm going to duplicate this hat over to another square here. And I'm just going to hit Control D. Again, this isn't going to probably sound very good, but as you are figuring out what does, you'll get a better feel of how to control duplicate. But I don't really like that. I kind of like it better when it's on the 1. So I'm going to delete all of them except for 1 just so I can restart. And I'm just going to have these on the 16th. Oh, you know what? I don't really like that either. I think it's 8. I'll extend these out. You'll see sometimes too, you see how close this is? This little empty bar of space. If you were to duplicate this over and think that it's going to duplicate over here, it's not, because of this empty space. I duplicate this over by pressing the clip, the header portion of the clip. It's going to duplicate not exactly where I want. I want it to duplicate at the 9.1.3, but it's doing it just before. Now, sometimes you might be intentionally trying to do that, but if I were to do this multiple times and think that it's going to duplicate on the 9.2, 9.3, 9.4, it's not going to do what I think it's going to do. It's going to duplicate not according to the timing that I would prefer. See, I have 7 hi-hats here and I only wanted 4. But because I'm thinking that it's going to duplicate here, but on this lane, of course, because I'm thinking it's going to duplicate here and then here and then here and then here and here, it's getting, with this empty space, it's almost accounting for an extra hi-hat, which I do not want. I only want 6 of them, but you can see here that I have 7. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what I'm talking about by duplicating this. So I'll just put hi-hat 1, and then I'll just do hi-hat. And I just do this for organizational purposes. I duplicate things over sometimes, and I'll, mute a channel, and then I'll work on the channel that I actually want to work on. So again, this empty space is what I'm referring to, but if I highlight everything, including up to the empty space, and I duplicate it, now I'll get what I want. I wanted these hi-hats like this, right? But you can see that this empty space, when it adds up, it almost gives me an extra hi-hat, which I do not want. And that's the reason why I muted the channel, so that you don't hear it. But this is what I do want you to hear. I want you to hear this hi-hat, this one right here. And then I'll grab this whole thing and duplicate it over. But for you, while you're learning, probably duplicate it over in better sections. So just get 1 bar's worth of what you want to duplicate, and then Control D it into multiple sections. And you can do that faster by, spamming the Control D, or duplicating it once and then grabbing that whole version or that whole section, the 2 bars, and then Control D'ing it again. And now you see you have 4 bars. Or sorry, 2 bars. I was looking at this up here. But if I duplicate it again, now I will have 4 bars, because 2 times 2 is 4. So we're doing math here too in music production. But you can see now I have these 4 bars of hi-hats. And with everything, this is what it sounds like. Again, it's not going to sound good, but this is just to show you what you can do while you're learning at least how Ableton works as a program. Okay, and that's what that sounds like. So, like I mentioned earlier, you will put on what are called audio effects onto each of your audio chains or MIDI chains, and you can build out what is called an Ableton audio effect rack. So you can do the same types of audio effects to a MIDI rack, but you cannot put MIDI effects onto an audio rack. So this, because it is MIDI, it can have audio effects, like it says here, drop audio effects here, but you cannot add MIDI effects to an audio rack, and it won't let you either. So if I try to do an arpeggiator onto one of these audio racks, it's not going to let me. So you see how it has that circled out icon? You can't add this onto an audio chain, but if you see me drag it over to the MIDI, now it's draggable, and it will let me arpeggiate this sound. So I'll just show you what this sounds like. It's not going to sound good, but you can change these settings to make it sound like something that you want. Let's take a listen. Okay, so like I said, you can't drag MIDI effects onto an audio effect rack, which is why we couldn't do that here, but you can drag MIDI effects onto a MIDI channel. You can drag multiple, you can duplicate these however many times you need. We'll just see what this sounds like. Okay, so the way that these work in Ableton is when you drag an effect one in front of the other, Ableton reads them from left to right. So you'll hear this effect before you'll hear this effect, and they feed into each other. So that it will do this one first, then it will do this one second, and then it will play whatever you have here. You can have, vital, or you can have, the other instruments. So you can have any of these other ones, and it will do that in that order. So it will do this arpeggiator first, this arpeggiator second, and then it will read your wavetable. So again, this is up to how you want to use it creatively, but there are no limits onto how you can use these. It's all up to your personal preference or whatever sound you're trying to create or recreate or use in your tracks. But I will continue explaining what you would do in the case of an audio effect rack. So like I said, you can do the same with MIDI as you can with audio, but you cannot do the same with audio as you can with MIDI. And I just showed you that reference right now with the arpeggiator. But we'll do audio effect racks to show you a better example of what I mean. Now, I have in my project default classes, or whatever you want to call them, when I open up my Ableton, which is what you can do. So I'll show you that right now, and then we'll get into the audio. Let me show you what I want with the audio first, and then we can get into the saving of your template. So I have these favorited here in my favorites, and I just put them here in a collection of the most used plugins. But most of these categories that you'll have here under audio effects are all of the usable audio effects in Ableton. If you have the suite version, you'll have all of them, but if you have the light version or the standard version, you'll have a fraction of these. But assuming you have the suite, you have all of the available audio effects, you can drag them and drop them onto your audio channels. So for the kick, I know I will need some sort of compressor to make it loud or perceivably loud, and I will also want an EQ so I can boost some frequencies so you can hear them better than others, and I will want some sort of gain plugin to account for how loud I want it to be perceived at. So I'll do the utility first, which will account for our gain. I have a gain knob here, and then I also said I wanted to do an EQ. I'll do an EQ8 just so that I can split these up into different bands. I won't use all of them all of the time, but I can, manipulate these frequencies how I want so that the listener can listen to what I'm trying to show them or point their attention towards for that either instrument or audio sample or whatever. Then I also wanted to add a compressor. So compressor is this right here. And let's just say this is how I want every single audio effect channel to be as its default, because I don't want to, have to look for these every single time, and I know I'm going to use them every single time, or let's just say yours is different. Let's just say you like using the saturator for whatever reason, or you're going to saturate a bunch of sounds, and you're going to do, I'll just show you what you might use right away. You might use this OTT plugin, Let's just say you're going to do this every single audio track, so might as well have it as default. How do you do that? So you go to the track that you want, you make sure that it's highlighted. I'll make sure that it's highlighted right here with kick. I'll right click and it'll say save as default audio track here. I'm not entirely sure where it is on Ableton 12. I'm not on Ableton 12 yet, but on Ableton 10, it's save as default audio track. You press that, and this is going to show up every single time you do a new audio track. So if I do Control T, every single time it's going to open up with those exact settings how I set them. And this is just how I have my setup. Again, your setup will be a little bit different according to how you like to produce, but this is just an example here of what you might do. Me personally, I don't think I would do OTT on drums. I might do a little bit of saturation, but again, the order matters here. So if I do Control Z is if you make an error and you want to undo it, you do Control Z. But if I wanted to delete something, again, you just backspace it and it goes away. Again, the order does matter. So on my kick chain, I start with the utility and then it goes into my EQ8 and then it goes into my compressor and then it goes into my saturator as they are turned on. And you can move these around as you're mangling your sounds, and you go, oh, this actually sounds better if I do it in this arrangement, because this is all creativity. This is all how you come up with your ideas. There's no right way to do things, but there is definitely a wrong way to do things. And you'll notice that when you hear your sounds, you're like, oh my gosh, that sounds like ass. Why did I fucking put it in that order? And then you'll iterate and you'll say, oh, I think the best way to do all of this is if I do it like this. Let's just say this isn't how I would do it, but again, you might have a different approach than I do once you build up your experience, and then you come to find out, oh, this is actually how it sounds best. And then when you compare your tracks against your favorites in the EDM industry, you'll say, oh wow, this is actually how I achieve a sound similar to XYZ artist, right? So again, there's no right way to do things, and you'll often hear people breaking the rules, but there's definitely a wrong way to do things. And the wrong way is when it sounds like shit and you know that it sounds like shit. So this is how I would set mine up if it were me. And you could see that I had it very similar to this. This is how I would start my audio channel, right? And if I know I'm going to be cutting a lot of sounds to make space for my bass, I would just drag this up to about 166 hertz and just leave it like that every single time. And now this is what it's going to sound like every single time I start a new audio track, and I just start inserting stuff in there. But depending on what you're trying to do, you might want to not have them. So definitely have a default, but don't be afraid to choose all of them and delete them when you're doing certain things. But as a starter, this would probably be a good place to start for whatever your effect chain is. That way you don't always have to look for utility, you don't always have to look for an EQ8, and you don't always have to look for a compressor. It's pretty much, this is your default settings. If you want, you can turn them off or turn them on. But again, it's up to taste and obviously the scenario that you're doing, but it's a good place to start. So yeah, we'll just continue on with how I want this kick. I'll make this volume 0 so that I can slightly adjust this and instead focus more on matching how I want the gain to be with these utilities. So that way, whenever I'm mixing my track at the very end, I don't have to adjust this knob that much. Because if you have crazy automations with just this knob, you're going to find that it gets very annoying to mix this song. And by the way, if you click certain parameters, like if you double click certain parameters, they reset to their initial value. So this initializes at -13, and if you double click it, it initializes back to 0. You can do the same with most of these plugins. If you double click, this is what it's going to set back to its initial value. I don't know if it's going to work here, but let's try it. It does. And then here, it does. I'm going to move these in a weird way so you can see what I'm talking about. And then, so I already did it for the EQ8. Let's do it for the compressor. Double click. It's set back to the 2:1 ratio. I double click the attack. It's going to reset to the 2 milliseconds. I double click here on the release. It's going to set to 50 milliseconds. This threshold, if I double click, it goes from -27 to 0. This out or this output, double click, it's going to go to 0. Same thing if I do it to the knee, and so on and so forth. If I double click, it's going to reset to all of its initial values when you drop in the effect. I will actually do this so that it's a starting point for you when you have your kicks. So I'm going to solo the track just so I can hear what it sounds like by itself, And you do that by pressing the track and doing, when this isn't selected, you can press S and it solos that track. You can press it again and it will unsolo it, but you make sure that you don't have this keyboard selected, otherwise it's going to play MIDI notes, and you can't play MIDI notes on an audio track, so it's just, you're going to be like, oh, what the heck's happening? But really what's happening here is this is the last track I had selected, so this should be the thing that's playing, right? So whenever I was pressing S, I was like, oh, what's going on? But really it was playing this wavetable, which I have this arpeggiator on, so it was messing with the sound. But yeah, anyways, make sure that this isn't selected. I press the track that I want, press S, it will solo, and now if I have it in a loop here, I can press space bar to listen to what I have. I'll turn these off. Oh, that's actually really loud, my bad. So I'll turn this down to -10. And then from there, I can figure out which frequencies are the best that bring out the kick and accentuate it, meaning I make it louder for the listener. And I can duck certain frequencies so that way others in the mix can be more prominent. And we'll cover mixing a little bit later. Again, this is just fundamental for now, but we'll cover mixing a little bit later in other videos. Okay, so that's what that sounds like. And then now I'm going to turn on the compressor, which will activate the compressor. With the compressor, the thing is, compressing sound will make it perceivably louder, and you'll also be able to see the differences of what that sounds like when you turn it on. So I'll just play and allow you to listen. As I adjust these, you'll hear differences in the output depending on how I mess with these parameters. You can tell that after I added this compressor, it sounded like it was punching harder, like it was like boom, it's hitting you in the chest, right? Sometimes that's what effect you want to go for, but again, depending on the effect, that's what you'll do in terms of organization of your audio effects. And I'm just going to add the saturation just for fun. I don't think I'm going to use it, and then I'll show you what's next. So I like the way that it sounds like this. And again, I'm just showing you how the basics of Ableton work. Again, this is all going to be how you want it to be when you're building your own tracks and analyzing your favorite producers' tracks. But for now, let's just say I like this. So I can group these by pressing the first one and then pressing the last one and also holding shift. So press the first one, hold shift, click on the last one, and it will select all of these. And you can Control G or Command G on Mac, and it will group them into an audio effect rack. The audio effect rack has parameters of its own. You can turn all of these elements off by pressing this first yellow dot, and now all of this rack is not applied to this kick. And I'll show you what that sounds like. That's what it sounds like. Now, if I turn it on, it'll sound how we last had it. Okay, and it has parameters of its own. So you have what are called macro controls here, or macro knobs, and you have the chain list. So these become really useful when you're building more complex and intricate chains. So that way you can have certain effects run in parallel on this audio track. So you can have multiple chains doing different things. You can have some for reverb, or you can have some for delay. You can mix in certain effects and not have certain effects mixed in. You can have some playing on the sides, or you can have some just in the mids, or you can have, just some of these effects on each chain. Now, I won't get into the complexity in this video. I'll probably do it in another video, but this is what you can use to make your own sort of plugin for an audio effect chain. So the macro knobs, you can all have mapped to the different parameters on your audio effects. So let's say, for example, I want to map this gain knob to one of my macro knobs, so that way I don't always have to adjust it here in a really long chain of, like, let's just say I have 13 or 14 and it's somewhere in the middle. I can just affect that parameter with this macro knob. So that way, whenever you have all of these hidden, you can just change this macro knob and it will adjust that sound in that track. So let's see how to do that. We will first press this map button. And now you can see all of these parameters become highlighted in green. And I want to map this gain knob to this macro number 1. And you can see by default, it starts it at -10. And while this is open, I can have the min and max values of that parameter changed. So I'll press this map for now so you can see what I'm talking about. Right now, it goes to the maximum value of 35, which you can see here. And it goes to the minimum value of -infinity, which means it's not audible. You won't be able to hear it. But let's just say I don't want it to always be 35 decibels and -infinity. I want it to be somewhere in between so that whenever I move this knob, it falls somewhere in between those. And that's where you control the minimum and the maximum value here. And I'll just put 15 here as an example and -20 as an example here, because I know that whenever I use a sound, I'm going to affect it within that range, or I'm going to want to control it within that range. So once I press this map button again, this macro mappings will disappear. And now it's just going to be in that range. So 15 and -20. And you'll still be able to hear this. Be careful when you're turning this knob up, because if you turn it all the way up and you press play, you might you might accidentally play it too loud and you'll be a little scared or you jump back. That's happened to me plenty of times. But anyways, that's how you use these maps. Of course, you can get a lot more intricate and sophisticated. You can also map multiple parameters to one knob. So let's just say, for example, I wanted to also map the width of this to, or I'll show you an example. This is something that I did the other day. I mapped the width to this map button. And now I have the stereo width here, and I also have this mono, and I want to map it here. So I'll show you what I mean in just a second. But if you set these values to, I think I had it at 1 and 0. And these are both stereo width. They might get a little confusing, but it has the name here. So you can see this one's referring to the mono button, and this one is referring to the stereo width knob. I had it on these exact, I think I had it like this. So now what it's saying is when the stereo width is all the way at 0%, that means it's 100% in mono, meaning it's just going down the middle and I'm not including the side information. But as I continue to increase this, then the mono knob turns off. And the width turns on. So now this is what it sounds like in stereo, and this is what it sounds like in mono. So let's try and take a listen to this. Picks normally don't have stereo width, but I mean, you can if you're trying to be creative with it. And I'll show you how it sounds like on the wavetable in just a second here, but for now, let's do what I just mapped here. Wasn't really noticeable here, but in other effects it will be. But that was just to show you an example of how to use this map in an audio effect rack. And you can do it, like I said, with many other parameters. It's all up to taste. It's all how you feel you will use it best or creative wise. And then you can add certain automations to make your life easier whenever you are producing, and build your own effect racks as you build up your experience as a producer. Anyways, let's just say I wanted to save this audio effect rack because I think this is super cool. Then I can set these to their default values and then save this effect rack. So I just wanted to show you what it looked like whenever I was showing the macro effects here, but you can leave it just like this, like how it initialized, or you can leave it like this, however you want. Again, it's all up to you. You can even change these colors by right-clicking and selecting a color, and then save this to your library. So let's just say I want to name this super cool audio effect 1 and save it. Now whenever I want to use this, I can just look in my user library or Control F and do super cool audio effect, double click it, and it will now show up in here so that I don't have to recreate it every single time. I'm basically saving it so that I can use it over and over again. So that is how to use the audio effect racks and the MIDI effect racks, and I will make another video whenever I make another video about explaining the basics of music production.